Good morning. Now for something a little less ethereal and perhaps a little more plebeian and entirely different. In the 3 years since I offered to write an essay about selfies, much has changed. Like selfies themselves, writing about them is a growth industry, and the bibliography now ranges from serious introspective analyses to guides and even coloring books. So I begin with a caveat that any statistics I might cite are probably out of date. Although some might disagree, it appears that selfies are still in their ascendancy. My interest in selfies began as part of a larger book project, American Faces, A Cultural History of Portraiture and Identity, published in 2016. And in the shameless commerce division of my talk, that's available for you up in the bookshop upstairs. In that book, which examines the myriad reasons Americans have created portraits since the colonial era, I was curious just where the selfie fit in. So, how exactly can we make sense of this enormous phenomenon? If the invention of photography in 1839 and its explosive growth in subsequent decades fostered a revolution, granting people of all social strata the opportunity to access images of themselves, it has been dwarfed in recent years by the rise of the internet. By the end of this decade, an estimated 5 billion people will be internet users, the first medium of universal communication. One increasingly prominent element in the communication of this is the dissemination of self-portraits, or selfies, pictures we take of ourselves, most often with a smartphone. Today, selfies are everywhere. While many countries have been quick to embrace the selfie, Americans are among the forefront in the creation and sharing of this form of digital communication. According to one source, every 2 minutes, Americans take more pictures than were created in the entire 19th century. And the selfie is but one aspect of the new visual culture with which we surround ourselves. The official arrival of the selfie to mainstream America might be dated to December 10th, 2013, the day that President Obama posed along with British Prime Minister David Cameron and Danish Prime Minister Helle Thorning-Schmidt selfie at Nelson Mandela's memorial service. That same year, the Oxford English Dictionary named selfie its International Word of the Year. In 2016, Snapchat, the image messaging service and mobile media application, announced it had hit 10 billion daily video views. The following year, it reported that almost 9,000 images were posted to its site each second, and of these, 5% were selfies. According to Adweek, quote, millions are shared and every day across all the major social media platforms, while, quote, Samsung reports that selfies make up almost 1/3 of all photos taken by people aged 18 to 24. Pew's Internet and American Life Project, for example, found that 92% of teenagers who use Facebook upload pictures of themselves. The selfie was given enormous visibility at the Academy Award ceremonies in 2014. With a nudge from Samsung sponsor Samsung Electronics, when Ellen DeGeneres invited Bradley Cooper to take a group selfie of award nominees. As a consequence, it has become the most shared selfie to date, although someone will probably tell me there's another one that's topped it, but that's what I know at this point. And for those of you who may not have been paying attention, now you can celebrate National Selfie Day, June 21st, the longest day of the year. In Sugar Land, Texas, you can take your selfie next to the life-size bronze selfie statue of 2 teenage girls photographing themselves with a smartphone. You can order a camera-equipped selfie drone from Amazon, and you can visit the Museum of Selfies, an interactive Madame Tussauds-like environment in Glendale, California, which I think needs a little help with their exterior design work. The word selfie itself has been around for only about 16 years. While its precise origin is unknown, a strong argument has been made for its first recorded use being September 13, 2002, in an online forum in Australia, a country where words are commonly shortened with IE endings, such as Aussie and Barbie. But regardless of the word's origin, there is agreement that it is used to describe pictures we take of ourselves and share with others via the internet. The worldwide ubiquity of the selfie is a given today, but prior to the advent of photography in the 19th century, creation of self-portraits was limited to professional and amateur artists who painted, drew, or sculpted them, or incised them on a metal plate for printing. They were most often elaborate and time-consuming affairs that represented a concerted effort by the artist to record his or her likeness for posterity. They were not the result of spontaneous decisions, but rather a belief in the importance of recording realistic likenesses that reflected enormous seriousness of purpose. Unlike the selfie, they could not be shared easily with others. But all that changed beginning in 1839 when those experimenting with the medium of the daguerreotype realized that along with the images of objects, landscapes, and other people, they could record their own images as well, more quickly and accurately than had previously been possible. Within a few short years, as photographic technology rapidly evolved, taking pictures of oneself became ever more possible. The carte de visite, invented in France in 1854 and introduced into the United States at the end of the decade, was a portrait photograph, albeit taken in a photographer's studio, that could be produced as a multiple and given to friends and exchanged. As early as 1862, it was observed, quote, "Cartes de visite are a curious study. 12 months ago, they were almost unknown. Now they fill one or more volumes on every center table and overshadow the contents of every card basket." Among the most significant 19th century developments in photography was George Eastman's invention of a small, handheld box camera that radically expanded the market for images. For the first time, anyone who could afford to buy a camera could take their own pictures. No longer was it necessary for the average citizen to visit the photographer's studio to have his or her image recorded. As film became less expensive, the entire process of recording a likeness became more accessible. As a consequence, the enormous gravitas with which some might have approached the experience of having a likeness recorded in the studio or of the painter, the sculptor, or the photographer was now reduced. Anyone with a camera could take a self-portrait using a mirror. Over time, other technical improvements made photographic self-portraits by amateurs more prevalent. A key development in the evolution and accessibility of the self-portrait was the invention of the self-timer, a precursor to the selfie stick, which was popularized around 1918 when Kodak first advertised this compact device. It allowed the photographer, after arranging the composition, to set a time from 30 seconds to 3 minutes and then, quote unquote, get in the picture. With this invention, every amateur photographer was now in complete control of taking his or her self-portrait. The rise of the automated photobooth in the 1920s was another important precursor to the selfie. Its concept was simple. In exchange for 25 cents, the booth provided passers-by with a strip of 8 small black and white portraits in about 2 minutes. The booths had enormous appeal. They provided cheap, immediate results, and in part because of their anonymity, they attracted couples on dates. Photo booth strips became an inexpensive way to share self-portraits with friends. In the years immediately after the Second World War, increasing numbers of Americans were drawn to the Polaroid instant camera invented by American scientist Edwin H. Land, the latest device for taking informal portraits with immediate results. Polaroid film first produced black and white prints, but in 1963, color became available. The Polaroid process enabled users to create the first instantaneous portraits. While the deficiencies of Polaroid instant cameras were significant, for example, film colors were unstable, and both focal length and print quality were limited, they were enormously popular because of their ease of use and the immediacy of the results. Their impact on society portraiture proved enormous. Andy Warhol used the medium to revolutionize the format and character of portraits for wealthy Americans. But all of this is simply preamble to the events of recent years. While Martin Cooper invented the modern cellular mobile phone in 1973, it would be more than a decade. Fun, huh? You want to go back, right? It would be more than a decade before it was commercially available as the Motorola Dyna. In subsequent years, phones became steadily smaller and capable of an ever-increasing number of applications. During the 1990s, several manufacturers experimented with connecting devices wirelessly to the internet, which allowed for instant media sharing. On June 11, 1997, Philippe Kahn shared instantly with more than 2,000 people the first pictures of his daughter, born in a hospital in Santa Cruz, California. The first documented transmission of a publicly shared picture, although not a selfie, via a cell phone. 3 years later, the cell phones with a second front-facing camera were released by Sony Ericsson and Motorola. But large-scale recording and sharing of selfies virtually exploded in 2010 when Apple introduced its enormously popular iPhone 4, accompanied by an increase in the popularity of websites where selfie images could be shared. While the selfie is the most recent development in Americans' search to define themselves and their place in society, Selfie America, preoccupied with, quote, vanity, narcissism, and our obsession with beauty and body image, is really not that different from pre-Selfie America. As Dr. Pamela Rutledge, director of the nonprofit Media Psychology Research Center, has observed, quote, we are hardwired to respond to faces. It's unconscious. Our brains process visuals faster, and we are more engaged when we see faces. If you're looking at a whole page of photos, the ones you will notice are the close-ups and the selfies. When selecting selfies for online sharing, one dominant criterion is presenting ourselves in the best possible way to avoid embarrassment. This is really no different from 18th century America, when the primary means of recording one's portrait was the painted canvas, and then only about 1% of the population could afford to have their portrait painted. A primary consideration in making a portrait was conforming to one's idealized image. As a consequence, sitters avoided painters who they felt might paint unflattering likenesses, and painters often made sitters appear younger, thinner, and taller than they actually were. Likewise, portrait painters avoided painting blemishes, just as we can remove them today with features as Instagram editing filters. For centuries, Americans have used portraits of ourselves to define our place in society. For example, those wealthy enough to do so might have a portrait painted in the setting of their home, which served as a symbol of cohesion and family identity. Similarly, since the advent of photography, we've taken both formal and informal portraits of ourselves as part of various social rituals or gatherings, such as family reunions, birthdays, holiday celebrations. Selfies at these events are really nothing more than the continuation of customs via the most recent technology available. Not surprisingly, selfies are particularly popular with adolescents and other young users. Not only have they grown up entirely in the digital age, but many are at a point in their personal lives where they're beginning to define and reveal their individual identities. In a world where crafting an identity and building a social network are central, selfies are a logical form of expression. Like other forms of portraiture, selfies are created for specific reasons, determined by the creators. As Jerry Saltz has observed, quote, They are never accidental. Whether carefully staged or completely casual, any selfie that you see had to be approved by the sender before being embedded into a network. Selfies reveal a great deal about our social values. For example, we take selfies that shout, "Look at our beautiful family." As procreation and the family continues to be one goal of many Americans, although the idea of the stable nuclear family is increasingly less common than one might think. We take "I won" selfies, which reinforce our sense of self-esteem and remind us that we are victors in our chosen fields. "I made it" selfies record important personal accomplishments. And "I am somebody" selfies show us that even though we may not be leaders or celebrities ourselves, we've had contact with such people. "I belong" group selfies in which we are surrounded by friends from school, business, religious, military, political, or social organizations document relationships beyond the family. And "I exist" selfies share our most banal experiences with friends and family. In this particular mode of images, labeled arties, we photograph ourselves with an acclaimed work of art in a museum to demonstrate that we've seen it. These selfies, like so many photographic portraits from earlier times, enhance our sense of ourselves within a specific community, affirming our individual selves while helping us feel connected to others and part of the modern world. In many ways, these images have taken the place of film snapshots, as well as handwritten letters and diaries, as a way of recording the paths of our personal histories. One primary difference between the snapshot of past years and the digital selfie is that we do not need to record the image on film, send them off to be developed, and then dispose of the images that don't meet our personal standards. We can view, approve, and upload them instantly. This lack of delay and an enforced pause for reflection may mean that some selfies, like some emails, might be better off having not been sent, including intimate selfies intended exclusively for one viewer. In an age in which past standards of decency and decorum are under constant assault, the selfie has been used to test the limits of public tolerance. Because smartphones are always with us, the opportunities to take selfies are limitless. When disaster happens, planes crash, buildings burn, cars collide, crimes are committed, we're there, often camera and selfie stick in hand, to record the fact that we're part of the current news cycle. Similarly, and I would add about this picture, because this is an important aspect of it, when I saw this picture in the Philadelphia Inquirer in 2015, my reaction to it was probably what your reaction to it is seeing it now if you haven't read the attached caption in the volume that the Portrait Gallery has published. This young woman was taking her first airplane flight. She was supposed to travel with her aunt, and her aunt got sick, and so she had to go by herself. And then she had the unfortunate experience of having the landing gear collapse when she landed, and so what she did was pull out her smartphone and send a selfie to her parents to say, "I'm okay." So it's not "I'm here" the way some of these other selfies are, where people are commemorating their experiences at a natural disaster or something, but rather this was a thoughtful gesture by a young woman. These selfies, like, let me see, I've lost my place. Similarly, our race to be part of a larger story has led to disturbing subgenres of selfies where people put themselves in enormous physical danger to photograph themselves by demonstrating bravado, driving cars, hanging from buildings, approaching wild animals, or climbing towers. And this, even now, I get a shudder when I look at this particular image. This shift toward an increased emphasis on the self was seen some years ago by the literary critic Lionel Trilling as the 20th century's displacement of an earlier focus on character and sincerity. One might speculate that as more Americans abandon such historically important social structures as organized religion, our secularized lives are increasingly dependent on other devices, such as selfies, to provide order and structure to our daily lives. So today's focus on curating our online portrait through shared selfies and other electronic means is how we, in part, fill our secularized void. We craft our identity through fitness regimens, dieting, cosmetic surgery, travel, fashion, and the accumulation of material objects, all of which, like the selfie itself, contributes to our need for self-esteem and relieves any self-doubt about having a meaningful place in society. These images, when assembled in groups like those found in leather-bound family albums of years past, provide a revealing glimpses of our perceived place in American life. While they can serve as a guide and give structure to memory, these selected images in the past have been called a matrix of illusions, as they reveal only aspects of our lives that we chose to save. One important selfie subgenre is the celebrity selfie. Celebrities today are people who lead public lives, are well known for accomplishments of interest to the public, actively seek to maintain their status of being well known, are highly visible in the media, and connect to us on a subconscious level. Images of them serve as a vehicle for social bonding with fans and supply content to celebrity and entertainment news. In so doing, the dissemination of selfies serves to sustain celebrity capital and continuous branding. Their appeal to followers is that they exhibit the allure of a desirable career, a fit and styled body, and an enviable life of consumption. Through a constant distribution of different selfies, they also give the illusion of a level of intimacy not available elsewhere and a sense of seeing someone's life as it unfolds. It's not surprising that in the age of globalization, mass production, big business, big government, big media, and standardized public education, we feel a need to reassure ourselves that we're unique and special. Indeed, we are in an age where many of us will go as far as to brand ourselves and the selfie as self-publicity, as a self-publicity image is a logical extension of this. In addition to Instagram and Snapchat, which enable us to be heroes of our daily lives, we now have innumerable devices and apps that collect troves of data of our personal habits in order that we may analyze it and better understand our inner selves and express our individuality. Conveniently, we can share information with the world. You walked 10,000 steps today? Click here to share on Twitter. You ate at a fancy restaurant? Let Foursquare share it on Facebook. Self-actualization and personal happiness, we are told, is the meaning of life. So, what comes next? With the past as our guide, we know that current technology, fashion, and social customs will continue to evolve. This is not to suggest that the selfie will vanish. Far from it. But the form of the selfie and its use are unlikely to remain static. We are only beginning to realize the enormous potential that selfies have for practical application. For example, financial service companies USAA and MasterCard are introducing programs that use the biometric authentication attributes that selfies provide as a security method to replace passwords to log on to their mobile banking apps or withdraw money at ATMs. Several states already allow law enforcement agencies to use facial recognition as a tool of investigation, while retailers used it to identify problematic shoppers. In the field of medicine, patients have been encouraged to take selfies to track the progress of medical concerns, and practitioners use them to record how dressings need to be reapplied during in-home treatments. And recently, a transport company, Uber, announced that it will require all drivers to take selfies before signing onto the platform and taking ride requests. Dr. James Canton, longtime CEO and chairman of the Institute for Global Futures, and recognized by The Economist as, quote, one of the leading global futurists, believes that video selfies will, in the next few years, replace the present standard picture selfie, and that augmented reality selfies will allow which will allow us to project ourselves into other locations around the world, will become part of what he terms the selfie economy. In his vision, companies like Apple, Nike, and Philips, as they continue to commodify the self and sell us back our identity, will become creative sponsors for our collective selfie projects. Is this the future? Time will tell. The only thing of which I am reasonably certain is that at some future state, an audience will gather here at the National Portrait Gallery to make some sense of it all. Thank you.